Hello everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. Welcome to the 17th episode of Season 4. I will say we're getting very close to the season finale. I don't know exactly when that will be. I gotta figure it out. But I'll be in Vancouver for SIGGRAPH, not this week, but the week after. I have no idea what the schedule is going to be, so I don't know how that will time, but there will not be a regular episode 2 weeks from today. But in any case, everybody start getting those questions going in the chat. If you're on YouTube, feel free to type out a question. If you have a link you want to post, you have to be on Twitch. There are definitely advantages to be on Twitch or on YouTube, depending on your preference. On YouTube, you're able to rewind and play forward again. On Twitch, it's more real-time, and if you type in the chat, I see it a lot quicker, and you're able to put links in there. If somebody puts a link and I'm working on a project and that you click on their link, you're like, oh, that's a cool one. You can second it, and that's going to keep, I'll pay more attention to the ones that more people seem interested in. I tend to try and answer questions from new people or people who don't typically ask questions, like if there's more than one. If you do put a link, make sure I can see the artist or studio who put it together, because if I can't give credit, I'm not going to look at it as reference. But typed out questions on YouTube are definitely things I like as well, so don't feel shy about putting those in there. So let's look around on the chat, see if we've got anything. Flavio on YouTube is asking if there might be a way of building a parachute using the new cloth. That is tricky. That's a tricky question. I mean, when you say parachute, there's a lot of different ways of thinking about it. My assumption is going to be that you want it, the unfolding motion, because if it's not the unfolding motion, then it's just a model and you could just deform it. So it goes to, could we not do it in the fanciest, the craziest, like properly folding a parachute type of way, but would it be possible to kind of crumple something up and then have it inflate? Like that is a good question. The cloth doesn't actually see airflow, but we could blow air up at it. So in theory, it could potentially inflate. So this is not this question has potential for sure. So let's try and do a very basic version before we try and fold it up. So here's the thought. We'll do the simplest possible version here. So I'll just do a couple subdivisions here. It would probably be better if, what's the best way to do it? If I feed this into a remesh, what does it give us? Maybe a little bit better, because it doesn't go to a point there, but even here, I'd still kind of prefer a grid of some sort. So if I make this editable, and let's grab all of the interior of it, hit MD to close polygon hole and tell it to be based on a grid. You can see we end up with this grid shape. So is there any need to smooth that out? Let's shrink our selection, MG for the iron tool or smoothing. And actually I'll shrink it one more time. And now I'm gonna, you see, kind of smooth that out a bit, trying to maybe make this a little bit more even. So anyway, that just gives us something that's more like a quad. I don't know how many strings are actually on a parachute, but let's just go, there's probably actually quite a few. But just to eyeball it as a quick test, let's grab these corner points, and I'll also grab the midpoint. I don't think we get an exact midpoint, so we'll just get close. So we've got 8 points selected now. So the basic version being, let's add a simulation cloth dresser and fix these points. And we could, technically we just leave gravity on and that will sync, but we'll counter gravity by creating a simulate. We'll start with just a simple wind, and we'll have the wind blow upward. And I don't know what number we need this to be, but I'll set it to 100 to begin with. Let's hit Control D, simulation CPU from my computer, hit play. Okay, so now gravity's still stronger than the current wind. So let's try 5 times stronger, almost neutral, so we'll do 1,000. And now you can see that's starting to push upward, so obviously we need a very strong wind. 5,000, so that's finally enough to start kind of pushing it up. And with it pushing it up, let's make it very bendy. and definitely get some stretch. So yeah, that's allowing it to stretch and push up. There's a lot of kind of wiggling going on. There's not... let's see if we can put a friction in. I'm not sure that that will actually work. Let's crank that up really high and see if it actually does something. Yeah, okay, so the friction here does stack. There is, I think, currently a bug where if you use a field force, then all the other forces turn off and you can only use a single field force, which in a lot of ways is kind of still doable because once you use a field force, it's kind of like all of them combined. But just something to keep in mind. But anyway, I don't want that going too crazy. So here's like a super basic version in which we could see that even a simple shape like this, we are able to pin certain points in the entire thing. We can get it looking sort of inflated. Now, there is, as I mentioned, there is no drag or what's the other word? The drag or lift that soft bodies have. So you wouldn't be able to kind of do it with realistic airflow to catch anything. Like that's just not the way it works. But yeah, because nothing's trying to stop it or slow it down. We might be able to limit. So I guess to push the question further, like maybe it's not so much about the unfolding because the original person asking a question is asking about more like falling with air drag, which does seem, you know, we don't have drag, we don't have lift. Having said that, what if, what's the best way to do this? What I would like to do is create some quick ropes. Let's see what the quickest way to do this would be. Selecting all, D for extrude, extrude downward, select each of the edges that would be the ropes. Right click and say edge to spline. So now we've got a bunch of splines exactly where we want them to be. Selecting the splines, one side of the splines, I'll hit T for scale and scale them down to 0. Then select all US, 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 and I'm just subdividing again and again and again. You see I'm trying to get a reasonable number of subdivisions. That should be completely fine. So now, instead of this cloth being fixed, I'll clear those, so now they're free to move around. And unfortunately, you can't fix, I don't think it's possible with a rope to, oh, you can fix a point. Okay, so we can do that. So I'll select that. There's always a chance you don't select every point. If I move this, yeah, no, it did select all of them. Excellent. So I'm going to say set, so those can't move. Now we need a simulation connector, and it's going to connect to other objects. So if I say create, they're directly on top of each other, but in theory, each of these ropes have now connected to their equivalent point on the cloth. The cloth is not connected to anything anymore. So I'm going to say that the cloth doesn't see the wind. So I'm going to put the wind in and turn it off. I'm not even sure that's actually the best way to do it. I don't know. I don't have a good intuition. In the past, this would be like a include or exclude, but now it says limit to, and I'm saying, well, limit to the wind, but turn the wind off. I don't know if that works the way I want it to. In theory, I'd also put the friction in and say turn that off. So anyway, let's hit play, and what do we got going on here? The ropes are connected there, but it doesn't feel like they're staying put. I'm going to make sure that we have, actually, let's grow the selection by 1. And indeed, we can't see that all of those, you know, are selected properly. So again, I'm going to clear and set those to be fixed. They shouldn't be able to move. Hitting play. Okay, they are stuck. And now let's see what happens. Okay, so not terrible. First of all, how can we make sure that this is let's see, I'm going to temporarily, let's save the file because I haven't done that yet. So you get access to the scene files on Patreon, if you're supporting on Patreon. And I did spend a lot of time last week catching up on all the files I'd fallen behind on. Come on. Parachute, right? Okay. I'm going to temporarily delete the simulation tag on that. And okay, you see the ropes are still blowing up, even without the cloth pulling up. So whatever technique I did, this technique I did to try and make it ignore these did not work. So something I have done, which I feel like is a kind of a silly workaround, but let's just do something really simple. If I were to make a wind, and that should be blowing off to the side, I'm going to say, okay, limit this to this wind. So now it's saying, well, only look at that one. And if I take that wind and make it like, well, if I make it 0, it should be doing nothing. But now you see that, now you see how the ropes actually fall before they get pulled up. So now nothing's applying. That seems like a silly workaround, and I might be doing something wrong. But yeah, now these forces are only being applied up here. So I think that works just fine. Now, those get pulled up. We don't want this losing too much of its shape, so let's go and make it less bendy, perhaps. I'm gonna get rid of all the bendiness. Okay, yeah, that's not terrible. Even a little bendiness goes a long way to it deforming. And you see it's not filling out, like it's not filling up a volume because we don't have that type of airflow. But it is successfully pulling up on the ropes. And the ropes are stopping it from flying away. So we've got that going. Let's go a little less stretchy. That might maintain the shape a little bit better. Yeah, not bad. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. 0 bendy and 22 on stretchiness. Okay, so this was us attaching the ropes and saying, okay, the ropes just can't move at all. And you'll see that how I'm kind of stepping my way through the process. I don't know what's going to work, so let's not build the entire rig. Apologies for any noises you can hear. I don't know how well that's going through the microphone, but the construction's still going on outside. Anyway, these get pulled up. Or instead of like building a big giant rig and not knowing what's going wrong, it's like first I made sure that the curvature would work, and then we made rope and we connected there. It's like, okay, the curvature still works, and now the ropes are what's stopping it from going. And now that I've done that, let's make it so that it is not, these ropes are not stuck on the ground like this. We'll release those, and instead let's connect them to some shape on the bottom. So we always do just cloth. Let's make a capsule person. That seems more fun. We'll go all the way with it and build mesh. I feel like I should just build a little preset that does this because I've been doing this process so many times because we always want to get our figure, which that's probably want to inflate it a little bit. And then remesh. Drop that down to 20% mirrored on X. Yeah, nice low poly version. We could even go further down just to make sure everything runs nice and quick. Yeah, I'm completely fine with that. So that becomes our person. We move this down, and I'm just going to connect it to the top of his head. But if we move that pretty close, then we should be able to. We've got this connector, and this is already attempting to connect things. And if I say create, we have to turn this into a soft body simulation cloth. Now we'll go back to those connectors and say create, and now you can see that a little connection has been made. And I think I don't know, this might not have only connected to one. It might have connected to possibly 3 ropes because we have max connections of 1, or it might have connected all of them, and I don't know which. Anyway, this is now cloth. Let's make sure that that is not seeing anything except for our 0 wind. Let's call that wind 0 so we can keep that clear. I'll save it as another version. And hit play. And okay, did success. Okay, all the ropes connected. And okay, this is not bad. So let's what do we have going on here? We've got the character falling with full weight of gravity. We have the ropes falling with the full weight of gravity. We've got a wind effect that's pushing up on the parachute. So you'll see that the character wants to fall faster, but then suddenly the parachute's tugging and it super slows our character down. So it's not bad where this is kind of, the simulation is doing something. It's drifting off to the side. I don't know if that's good or it might not be realistic. I'm not sure. And the character definitely is deforming down a bit, but that's not bad. We've got a couple additional options we can potentially do. Well, first of all, we can make the character want to maintain the volume a bit. Let's even overinflate him just a hair, and we'll give him 0 bendiness. Yeah, so okay, he's a little bit more consistent of a shape while still being a simulation. The entire parachute pulling down, like drifting nice and slowly. The friction is definitely slowing the entire thing down, but that's just like, I didn't want it flapping all over the place. If we turn off the friction, there's a good chance that, actually no, it's still, the wind by itself is still what's pulling him down. I thought maybe the friction was just what was slowing him down, so that's good. So, more wind should have either slow him down more. If we do enough, it'll actually, okay, so, okay, now there's enough wind where it's actually pulling him up. So just depending on the amount of wind, that could have a big effect that way. Now I'd like it to be, definitely drifting down, but slowly. And now we'll create some wind, additional wind with a simple turbulence. And let's jump that to maybe 55, give it a pretty big scale. I'm gonna say 555. Should be the noise scale, a blob of a noise should be about the size of a cube, I'm guessing there. And currently this will be applying to only the parachute because we told the other things to exclude. And you can see a lot of the strengths on the simulation stuff seem weaker. I'm going to push it further, and this could, intentionally push it too far. And now we can definitely see the character getting whipped around. In general, we have a strong wind pushing up, but, and I don't think we'd want to actually be whipping them around like this. But now we can see what went too far, but we can now weaken it and add a little bit of drift in there. And keep in mind, we could also drift. We can, here's this wind. And I'll put the wind into a group and then say, okay, wind, I want you to get some random rotation. So I'll add a vibrate tag on there, enable the rotation, set that to 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, and put the frequency down to something real small, like, not even that's too much, 0.05. So now, and let's make it more extreme, 55. So in theory, what should be happening, and it'll turn off the turbulence. So what should be happening is the wind is going to tilt. You see the wind's gently tilting to the left, and then now we're gently tilting backward. And as the wind slowly dips just one direction and the other, it's going to slowly influence the way the character is drifting. So that's better than the turbulence, I think. So it's fake in a way, but but this piece of cloth is holding up the rope, which is holding up the character. So I guess it's kind of realistic in that way. So with that being the concept and it working pretty well overall, does anybody have any follow-up questions that we can do on this specifically, as far as like a parachute concept? Because a lot of things can be pushed further and further. This is as simple as it gets. I'm sure this isn't even the proper shape for a parachute, but for it just being out of the gate and working, like the concept is there. Okay, well, hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if there's more specifics on it. Welcome Justin, welcome Tom, Matthew, David, JM, Travis, Dim, what's going on? Mr. Matt Dog, Dean, Tobias, Zach, Sid, Candy, Trashfire, what's going on? Behavana, Type Ogre, oh man, so many names. Okay, well, let's just keep going. See if there's any questions. Somebody says shoot him out of a cannon. I mean, it's not a bad question. We don't have a rest length, so the challenging part goes into if the idea was he's supposed to get shot out of a cannon and then a parachute comes out. First of all, there's a lot of questions there, but I do like the challenge, the idea of it. But we would have to compress this down. How could we compress that down easily? Because it needs to be in this original shape. If it's not in this original shape, then it doesn't know how to deform because it's trying to maintain a shape because of the current geometry. So we did do those techniques before. We kind of crushed it down, and we can't set. That's the problem, is we can't set an initial state. Yeah, doing it all as one thing, I don't think would. I can't easily think of a way of doing it. Like, yeah, if we'd made some, 2,000 frame animation where we compress the parachute and the ropes down into a small ball and potentially trap it inside a shape which is connected to his back, and then make that shape disappear at the proper moment, maybe the parachute would open up and catch. Like, there's potential for that. But that would be a lot of really fiddly things to get working. How might we do that? Yeah, and we'd have to be doing a lot of keyframes. There'd be a lot of faking of things to do that. Although the basics of this parachute is pretty great. How? Because there's essentially no settings. There's no scale or morph or like follow position. Like, all these things are things that soft bodies might be able to do, but soft bodies wouldn't enable us to do these ropes this way. Yeah, it's the compressing of the parachute, trapping it at a particular time. I'm not even sure that that's possible. Like, they even turn off the ability to keyframe the simulation turning on or off. So I don't even know if we'd be able to put a container on the character and turn it off. I feel like if that geometry changed, like, everything would pop to its initial state. It would be really cool to do, which is why I'm taking extra time to think about it. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't think of a way of combining those two things, but I do want to try and shoot the character out of a cannon, so we can do that as a kind of separate concept. So, so I guess I'll just delete the parachute. And we'll just do the most basic version. Essentially, I want to see if we're able to accelerate the character in such a way that, it sort of works conceptually. So let's go to a top view. Yeah, that seems about right. So if we trap the character here, that would become I guess the only way to do it is no, we can just do a collider, of course. And yeah, it's seeing the front, so that's fine. We also need to make a cylinder and just block. Well, you gotta make it, let's make it look a little bit more like a proper cannon. So if I move a sphere down there, it's a silly amount of detail, but we'll do that. And we need that also needs to be a collider. Create a null. The null will pivot from around there. And inside of here, I'll make a taper. Taper, taper, taper. If I say fit the parent, yeah, it does that one, which is fine. Make it taller, and the size is fine, so I can just shrink it down. There we go. A little bit more cannon shaped. Scale the entire thing up a bit. Make sure that I think the character is properly inside there. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Let's distinguish between the two. So that should be a collider. Hopefully that sees the deformation. I'm not sure, so let's just hit play. Okay, you see the character is fine. He's flopping in there. Now, can we squish him properly in the cannon? Let's find out. So I'll make another shape here. I'm going to put the taper in there and in there, just two copies, then I don't have to worry about it. And we'll make a little plunger for our character. It's got to be relatively small because I don't want to pinch it. So essentially I'm going to push it. We're going to ram that into the character and try and force them down into the tube. We can also say that the cannon has no friction. And we can get rid of the bounce as well, just so it should freely slide on it is the idea. So coordinate, keyframe on Y, hit play, right around now. Oop. Yeah, right around there. Push that down. I'm going to just push it way down there. And then a few frames later, that would push up. Again, we can hopefully turn it off. That's my thought, because then we could say keyframe the enable, go one frame forward, disable that. So we'll just see if that works. So rewind, hit play, bonk. Okay, seems to have worked. Good job, simulations. I would like to see the NG mode. Okay, there he is, squished down pretty well into the cannon. Let's see. So he should be maintaining shape pretty well, but that pushes his head inside and his legs, everything just kind of compresses. I think that probably makes sense. Okay, so now I suppose we should tilt the cannon over. So let's hit play. He gets stuffed inside the cannon. Right around there, we keyframe our rotation. Play. Keyframe the rotation again. 40 degrees seems pretty good. Let's make sure that the simulation can actually run with that in mind. Plop. And tilts. Yep, that's fine. Oh, no, he started escaping through. You see that it definitely jiggled his way through, which is perhaps a little strange, because it shouldn't be able to escape that geometry. We can probably change a couple settings, but the this moving geometry, yeah, it does seem to be escaping, unfortunately. The only thing I can really think to do would be increase our collision passes. So let's try tripling those in our global settings. Didn't seem any better. Put that back to 2, and we're going to go to polish iterations. And I'm going to let's go up a significant amount just to see if we get a difference, even if it slows us down a bunch. So you see that actually was able to, it completely slid the way that worked, and it didn't even push them into the tube. So let's try that again. Better collision passes. You see that the air is like a little bit more accurate there. So that stuffs him in, and then he's able to fall through. Like, you know, that was pretty good. But I don't, yeah, I figured like the motion that we're getting when that rotates, that's the worry. Now, we don't have to rotate them over, but it's kind of the part of the point here is that, you know, that we want that type of thing to be able to work. Let's crank up another setting. You see that one definitely slows us down, but I just want to see if it does work. And then we should try just regular old substeps. That might actually give us our best bet. Yep, still escapes, so no good there. Default, substeps. Let's go triple the amount. Couldn't even, the pipe isn't pushing him in properly. Increase the radius a few. Get in there. Nope, he still survived. His inflation might be fighting us right now. Put that to 1. 0. We can start it later. Yeah. Oh, kind of. It's passing through the character a bit. This, oh, no, and he still escaped through the wall. That is unfortunate as a singular detail. Yeah, if it doesn't like substeps, and we still saw it escape through there. I'm not even quite sure what iterations does. Let's do 5 times the number of iterations. See what that gives us. Seems to be pushing him in the 2-bar, right? Yee. Oh, for a few frames it looked okay, but then eventually he escapes through the walls. Almost entirely out through the walls. V-Ruckus is asking if the poly count on the cannon makes a difference. I don't think it should be, because I don't think there's a visibility mode for it. Unlike in the bullet simulation where we can visualize things, like we can't see the way it should be generating particles on the surface because it's a particle-based simulation system, so it should be subdividing. But why don't we try throwing a couple extra subdivisions? That might increase some fidelity there for us, so I'll increase that all the way around for the cannon. Control D. The iterations, we're back to defaults again. So let's see. Plop. Hey, that actually worked. That's kind of, it's hard to tell. He does seem to have escaped through the walls a bit. It did seem to work better though. So let's add a few more. And let's get him re-inflating again. Okay, let's squish him inside. Squish. Yep. Okay, that seemed to work pretty well. Okay, good call. Good call. Okay, so with that tilted over, now we can move to saving the file. To a simulation cannon. So the thought now is, I can't think of a better way of doing it than just cranking up a wind force very quickly and possibly for a very short amount of time. So dropping that inside the null, reset the transform, aim it upward, and we could limit it to the character, but it's the only simulated thing here, so we don't have to worry about doing any limiting. The remesh is still seeing wind 0, so we should delete that because wind 0 isn't doing anything. So now it should be seeing this wind. We already know that 5,000 was like almost not, it was barely enough to make the parachute sort of float. So let's let the character fall in and then right around 1, 2, now. So I'll go back 2 frames, 180. So let's say at this time wind speed is 0. 1 frame forward, wind speed will be, I don't know, 50,000. And let's just go 1 frame, 2 frames. All right, definitely some. Okay. It's definitely enough force to seem to fling the character. So let's see what we end up with. Stuff the character in the cannon. Tilt over. Thump. Okay, so the wind is continuous the entire time. We don't want it to be the going all the time. So we should take this keyframe and duplicate it, and then take this keyframe and duplicate it carefully. So for maybe 5 frames, I'm guessing, the force will be accelerating them, and after that it turns off. So it shouldn't be constant. So let's get a little bit more of an angle going so we can potentially see how far it flies. Tilt over and fire. Pew! Okay, that is working pretty well. Keep in mind that instead of having just a force directly behind the character, we're applying it everywhere on the character. Okay, that's excellent. It's probably gonna be hard to catch the character because the plane was gonna have to get subdivided to catch him. So we could kind of visually do this. I wonder how far is he flying? Where is he? I can't even see him. Oh, there he is over there. Okay, so he's probably gonna fly further than that, but right around that should be fine. I just kind of doubt that this collision is going to, or this plane is going to be able to catch the character. We'll do a couple extra frames. Hit play. Yeah, see, he went right through, but that would have been my guess anyway. So a thought would be what we need is a higher resolution plane to catch him, pretty much right where we know he's going to land. So something like that, and let's subdivide it significantly again. And I think we might have already learned that we're deforming the object. So we're deforming the object, not moving the axis of the object. So what I would like to do is make a camera, and the camera will look at the character. But if I just add a target tag and say, look at the guy, it's never going to move. So you see, even when we get squished in, it doesn't actually move. So what we have to do is a little trick of making a null and adding a rigging constraint tag and say you will clamp, I think, clamp to the surface of this mesh with 0 distance. And now in theory this null, yeah, this null should have moved onto the head of the character. Now there might be a frame of lag. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So now instead of targeting the character, we'll target a null that's stuck on the character. So now with any luck, yeah, now we're actually moving down as the character gets pushed in. Cannon tilts over. Thump. Whee! And flop. Yep, and he actually landed and caught on the ground, which is pretty much exactly what we wanted. Yeah, there we go. We are firing the character out of the cannon. What more could you want? I like how we actually had to stuff the character down inside of it. That's pretty good. Pretty good. It's pretty good hang time. He seems fine. He's fine. Okay, any follow-ups to that? Yeah, firing cannons. That's always going to be fun. Let's see. I just want to see if there's follow-ups here. Follow into a wall. We don't have rigid bodies. That's not a bad idea. Why don't we... I'll save this one because it's working fine. Let's see how far we can push these soft bodies here. The cloth. Just to see. I don't think it's going to work very well. But why don't we try it and find out. So currently our cannon is tilting over that far. But let's say actually I can't click on this because it's a single value. So we need to go to the actual frame and say that will tilt over minus 80 degrees. So mostly downward. And hopefully the character will still be stuck in there. Now we can do the old brick wall trick, which is a cloner, a cube, and a null. Well, let me not do the null yet so you can see what I'm doing. So brick wall. Let's not go overboard, even though this might be overboard. Let's do 1 by 20 by 20 and make it wider. And then if we make a null and put it in, every other, maybe it's 2? Yeah, there we go. I guess it's just kind of a honeycomb. We might not need that anymore. We might be able to just do the honeycomb. We don't get to use honeycomb too often. There we go. That works. Offset spacing. Let's just start with smaller numbers. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. We just have to spin it. T for scale. Make the cube wider. Let's go way wider. Honeycomb width. Nope, I forgot we rotated it. Oop, I made the bricks way too wide. That's about right. There we go. Now, we can't do rigid body. There just aren't rigid bodies in the simulation system as it stands. So I just don't know how it's going to be able to handle this with cloth, but I want to see. So that's why we're trying it. Okay, so I'm going to delink from our animated camera. And this brick wall, I think it's just going to see it as a single object. I don't know. So putting the cloth on there, all we can do is say don't be bendy. It's got some friction, it's got some thickness, it's double-sided, which is going to make it more rigid. We could technically try and inflate it back to its original size. That's pretty much all we can do. That's as stiff as it can possibly get. So hitting save, let's just hit play and see if this what this brick wall does. You know what? It's not terrible. Like, it actually stacked pretty well. So, and everything else should be set. I don't think they fall asleep. They're not falling over, which is decently impressive. The only reason that's working is it's so low poly, I think. But let's find out. And oh, they're seeing the wind. We gotta stop that. So I need to bring back a wind.0 with no power. Limit that to wind 0. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, the funny thing to think is, like, those blocks, these bricks are made of cloth, but there's just, it's not even stiff cloth. There's just not enough polygons for it to be able to really deform. So let's see what we get. Oh, you just barely clipped it. It did kind of work, though. So, okay, Canon. You need to rotate all the way. -90. They do settle down, or they're not as tall once they all settle. So let's clean these up a bit. We can make fewer and more. Also, not a bad idea to don't have them quite so far apart so they don't have to fall as far. We'll see if that can handle it. We might lose the top 2 corners, but that's fine. Okay. Try again. Stuff them in the cannon. And fire! Oh, you went straight through. Yeah, so he went straight through. The only thing that's not surprising, as we found, the best way to make something not pass through is to increase the poly count, and it can actually see things a little bit more accurately. So that might make these bricks more accurate, but then they're going to have more subdivision, so they might start, like, falling. So, like, we could give that a single subdivision, which will double the resolution. But the only other thing we can do is increase substeps or potentially collision passes. And And that could mess with the, first of all, it's going to go slower, and it might mess with the character getting stuffed inside, so who knows what changes when we do this. And yeah, we've definitely dropped to an even lower frame rate. So yeah, that's one of the tricks, and I've talked about this when it came to the old bullet simulation stuff, that it's really important that you kind of, like right now we're in the experimentation phase, but when you're going and working on a project, you have to kind of know what your final settings are going to be, because if we went and made it work perfectly where the character got stuffed in the cannon shoots, all works, and then we're like, oh, but we have to change all the settings so that he collides with the wall, then it might break all the work we did stuffing him in the cannon. Here it kind of worked, but I still don't think these settings are going to be high enough to collide properly. So it's going to fire. And yeah, you see the wall barely even acknowledge the character, although it did seem to slow the character down a lot. So, and I'm not even sure collision passes are like the best setting for us. Now we could fake it. We could do like a force that would suddenly block it there, but what's the point of that if you're doing a simulation? Let's jump this up to 100 sub-steps, but I think we're going to take a huge hit on our FPS. And unfortunately, like, we still have to play through the entire animation to get to that point. The increased steps per frame, the sub-steps, are going to make it so it does. You see the brick wall now has behaved differently, but increasing sub-steps makes everything stiffer. So keep that in mind as well. Like, if we are still doing the parachute, suddenly the parachute would be way stiffer, and we had to make it more stretchy and more bendy. So changing these simulation settings, these global simulation settings, is actually pretty dangerous to do, because you'll mess up every other aspect of your simulation. So if this doesn't work, I might be inclined to just move on to a different question, because I don't want to be sitting here waiting like a minute each time we play through to try and tweak some simulation settings. And it fires at 180. Activate the cannon. There he goes. And oh goodness, I think what we did oh no, I'm pausing it. So it was enough. It was enough. But the character just got wedged in between the bricks, and he didn't make the wall budge at all. Oh my goodness. The poor character is been stuffed. Like, you see, there's a little jolt, and the character got wedged in between a couple of bricks. Oh my goodness. All right, I know I said we weren't going to do it again, but we're going to try one more time where I increase the mass of the character by a lot. I'm going to make the character like just way heavier, which shouldn't change anything except for his relative weight versus the bricks. So the character is now 100 times heavier than you would normally look. Oh, I feel bad. Ever since we've been able to remesh the character, remesh the figure, like, we've been torturing him so much. I agree that the bricks could be way smaller, but you see how slow they are, only making it be this many bricks. So, like, yeah, obviously these are way too large for the character, but if we had a brick wall the size of this with appropriately sized bricks, there'd be like, I don't know, 40, 100 times as many bricks, and we just can't run, we just couldn't run that simulation. The character, what did we just change? We made the character heavier. It seems like it's having more trouble falling through the tube, which might not make the arms are still sticking out. I don't know why making the character heavier affected that, but yeah, the character is only partially stuffed in the cannon. You might not get the proper acceleration, but let's just see what happens. We've gotten this far. And fire. Oh no, what's going on? It's almost like he got stuck as he was getting flung out. And look, he didn't like make any distance. Does his increased mass mean that he need... Well, yeah, it's been affecting it everywhere. I don't know what to make of that. Would we need a stronger wind to blow the character, or was he just kind of caught on the edge of the cannon? Yeah, I don't even know what settings we'd have to change to make that work better. I suppose we can make this a little bit larger to try and push him in more. And then the wind, I would have thought that would have been fine. Clearly it wasn't. We'll try making the wind 10 times stronger, but that will be the last run that I do. There. So it's now 500,000 power on the wind. And let's start picking out the next question. Yeah, moving knowledge. I don't, you're saying maybe the energy was lost by bouncing inside the cannon. In theory, it shouldn't be able to bounce inside. Or it's like, it's not like passing through the wall, so it shouldn't be getting caught. The cannon, did we... Yeah, we got rid of all the friction, so, you know, the arms aren't going in again. And, oh yeah, it even seemed to have passed through. This pillar is passing through it, so that's strange. I wouldn't have thought that changing his mass would have any effect there. I wonder if we can keyframe the mass, where, let's say the mass is up really high now, and I'm going to go back a frame and say that the mass is regular. So we'll just start that again. And now, assuming that this indeed can be keyframed without resetting everything, let's see if that can actually stuff the character inside better. It almost seems like it's... isn't that strange? Why... I didn't change... Like, right now, nothing should have changed about the character. But you see, he's not getting pushed in the cannon very well. I did increase the radius. So maybe that went beyond the ability to push him in. Come on, squish him in there. Squish him. No, he's not going in again. I wonder what changed. I mean, it is going in, but I don't think that's the way it had looked before. Yeah, see, it's pulling it back out again because it's caught on the tube. I didn't change any settings that should affect that. In fact, we took the mass, we made the mass bigger, and then we keyframed the mass to be smaller again. I'm not sure what to make of that. I just want to see what this acceleration does. I mean, it should still, unless it falls out of the cannon, it should still accelerate it to like an insane degree. Of course, well, yeah, that should just put him back to the same speed we sort of had before. That's the idea. Even though he is 100 times heavier. He's 100 times heavier. And the wind is only 10 times stronger. So keep that in mind. It does seem like he's... The mass increased, but it seems like he's trying to maintain his shape a little bit better. Whoa. Okay, there goes the cannon. He gets super duper flung. And he just bounces off the wall again. Yeah. I mean, we are trying to trick this into doing things that it wasn't super specifically designed to do. Keyframing his mass up seems like a bad idea. Well, I wish it worked, but it doesn't seem to be. So that's as far as we'll take firing at a brick wall. Firing at a cannon worked well. Firing at a brick wall, not working super well. Keep in mind that, you know, we would have potentially alternatives. Like, I don't know if this will work, but if we tell this to be a... If I tell... I don't know how these systems interact, but if I tell the character to also be a collider body, and then we make the bricks a bullet rigid body, I don't know if these two systems will see each other or their order of operations. And I suppose the ground also needs to be a collider body. Now these are not part of the soft body, which means they should, in theory, run quicker. And let's get rid of all that mass. See, I didn't change anything. And look, it just stuffed them in the cannon way better. I got rid of the mass. Oh, he's going to fire way too fast. Let me try and fix that before we get there. Wind. Put it back to the weaker version. Now, the idea would be that the cloth is going to fling him forward. And the brick wall, and hopefully this collider tag, is now saying, well, doesn't matter what shape this is, it's now a collider. Which means it will just pass through this brick wall. But the brick wall would hopefully react. In fact, let's go to bullet and general, or expert rather, and do 20 steps per frame. Just to give that a better chance of seeing it as it flies through. Oh, pause. I don't know if it hit yet, but we have to tell these not to fall asleep. And go. Whoa. Oh, and that makes perfect sense. Forces, exclude, wind. Okay, we're running again because now we're running relatively fast again because these are rigid bodies, which are way quicker. Character getting stuffed inside the tube. Okay. Fire. Yeah, so actually the two systems worked pretty well with each other. Now keep in mind that that character was in no way interacting with this brick wall. The brick wall has to do whatever the character does to it, but the character's not reacting to this brick wall at all. It's not slowing down. It just flew through. I mean, look how far he's flying. Has he even hit the ground yet? I think he might have. Yeah, he's now scraping along the ground. But yeah, the brick walls will react to it. So, you know, the two systems can be combined. It's good to know. And I mean, there's ways potentially to fake it so that we could make it act as if he was colliding a little bit. For instance, we could put a sheet up, like a very inflexible cloth sheet that maybe it hits and the character would react a little bit. But that would be, you know, kind of layering up and making that a little bit more fake. But, you know, you can get these two to combine, which isn't really something we've tried to do. Oh, and then Elaine, well, I didn't read it, but Elaine was asking if it's possible. Oh, well, you were asking if it's possible for Maxon to add a rigid simulation into the rope and cloth sim. I hope so. I don't know how the particle system works, but I really hope that we get some rigid bodies along with it. But these two did mix better than I thought they would. PR5K asking any tips for 360 product turntables with consistent lighting and reflections at all angles. I can never get shiny materials to look consistent at every angle without manually adjusting light and reflections. Yeah, I'm not. That's not my area of expertise. And you were asking the chat in general, so maybe. Oh yeah, Tobias had a good suggestion, which is the lights and reflections could be in a null that rotates with the same object relative to it, or you could make those rotate to aim at the camera. So even when the camera moves, like your lighting is rotating around with the camera. But even that goes to don't, when you're doing here's maybe even a simpler way. Don't do a turntable by like moving the camera around in a circle. Just have your object in one spot and rotate the object. So now the lighting's not changing, the camera's not changing, the reflection shouldn't be changing, just your object is rotating in one particular spot. Jam. Let's see what you got. Linking to an Instagram. Muting. Pulling it over. Oh wait, we tackled this. Well, not this exact question, but literally the very first episode of Rocket Lasso Live, we tackled something along these lines. Now, what are we looking for? It does say Cinema 4D. I recently did a little freelance project for a buddy of mine. It does say side effects as well, though. So actually, my assumption is this was rendered in Cinema, but made in Houdini. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I recently did a project for a friend where essentially I did these kind of paint strokes for him. But, you know, I don't think that project is live or anything. I wouldn't want to, like, talk about it ahead of time. But it was pretty cool. It did work really well. And it did use a lot of techniques from the original thing we had done. The interesting thing here that I don't have any kind of a good intuition for is it's taking on the color. You see when these cross over each other that the color smears? I just don't have any kind of intuition for... essentially, I don't think there are proper tools in Cinema to do that properly. And this is mentioning X particles and whatnot, so maybe there's some particle method that they have that does it. I like this question, but this would take a really long time to make any kind of version of. The specifics matter. It would be really, really time intensive. And then especially getting, I mean, there's a lot of, actually, I mean, this is super duper impressive. Like, first of all, this is from Kubism New? Maybe? Anyway, oftentimes when we're looking at these references, it's like, oh, you can see where they faked it. This looks incredible because, first of all, you're getting, the first thing you see that is like, okay, you get a really nice looking trail. Okay, fine. Okay, then you get the color smearing. That's pretty amazing. But if you start looking even more specifically, you're going to see what almost looks like little bristle pops. Let me see, right around one of them. Yeah, right there. Look, see this little cross thing? It's almost as if one of the little hairs in the brush fell off, which when you're painting things happens, and it's really frustrating, but it's really incredible. But then you'll even see here, like, look when it does, yeah, right there. You see that arc? It actually is making a smear, and you can see it's actually kind of melting down into the ground. Like, it's not just like, oh, it appeared. There's a lot of secondary details here that are pretty incredible. So, like, could we do the quick and lame version of this, that we weren't worried about color smear or anything? Like, yeah. But then all these little secondary things, like, there are potentially ways of going about doing those, but there'd be even more time to make the rig do each of those individual elements. I've also, in the recent rig I did, it was using a very, very, very high poly version of the volume mesher, of the, like, volume builder mesher stuff. And it made it so that, you know, it wouldn't play back very well in the viewport. The final would look good, but yeah, I mean, super impressive. And actually, they are saying that Intagma, that this is referencing Intagma for some technique that they did. And they might have had like a whole giant Houdini breakdown of what, like, to do a very similar technique at some point. And I am assuming that the geometry and everything is coming in from Houdini. I'm not seeing it in their Instagram, but you know, I don't doubt that they haven't done something along those lines. Yeah, so without me being able to think of a couple of ways of somewhat easily doing a couple of these advanced techniques, I kind of don't even want to tackle it. Like the way that some of these lines are erasing out some of the other lines, like that's incredible. It's interesting that the brush seems to turn with it. That's something to keep in mind. I'm not going to go too far in it, but I will show a couple of basics of some of the concepts that you might do. And a lot of these are it's just a version of what the very first episode, what we had done there. So let's just make a null, and let's say that is our canvas. And that's about just over 1,000. So we'll say, I'll just make it random right now. So animation, vibrate, position, up to 1100, 0 on Y, really slow, 0.1. So if I hit play, we're going to see that is moving around super, hopefully relatively smoothly, just traveling around doing its thing. So then I can make a tracer. There's a lot of different layers here, and if I was to be designing a good version of this rig, I'd probably be like changing like concepts again and again and again and again as I go through. But you see that we're now tracing out this line. Might be a little bit difficult to see. So just for the stream, I'll feed in a quick sweep just so you can see it actually doing something. This is not supposed to be the final geometry. So, now you start getting a trail drawing around, but we want the direction it's traveling as well. So let's see, I would make just for visual clarity, let's make a cone. Let's aim the cone up on Z positive and then say, okay, cone, I would like you to align to spline. I want you to align to the tracer at 100%. So now essentially that should be stuck to the tip, and I can say turn on tangential. So by doing this, we've now got a cone that is adapting to the direction because it's stuck on a spline that has a previous position. So you can see that the entire thing is now aiming in a particular way. So that was the goal of getting a direction going. So now that there is a direction going, what if we say instead of this being a cone, and we will visually leave the cone, I'll make a matrix object. And the matrix object, Z will be facing forward. So let's make this a child of the cone, 0 out its PSR. And now you can see I've kind of got this, a series of dots going along in a line. I'll drop this down to, we'll leave it at 10. And say that is the paintbrush. We don't need to make it quite as wide. So let's say that's essentially the points of the paintbrush. So now, visually, let's hide that line. And, well, let's just turn off that tracer. And now you can see that that's the original path. So now we've got this matrix object that now has an orientation as well as moving around in that same position. So when I make a new tracer object, I'm tracing all of those, and now you'll see that, and you got to always rewind a couple times in the beginning, or this tracer's got to be after the object too. Well, it's being a pain there. I'm going to kind of ignore that. It's always a thing that the tracer doesn't want to refresh properly. Actually, this is zeroed. Oh, yeah, tracers are a pain in the butt that way. What's happening, I'm going to solve this by, at the time of 0, this cannot be aligned to a spline because the spline doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to fix that by just moving. We're going to morph into our final position of right there by keyframing our amplitude and starting at 0, which means we should be at 0, 0 there. And now we're going to actually morph into that first shape. So anyway, now you'll see that we are getting kind of this rake shape, and it actually has a curve and it changes direction along with it. So this was pretty much as far as I was going to go with things right now to show you, but you know, with these lines traveling around, you can see how we're kind of getting, we're definitely getting an implied brush with a distinct direction. Now, just think of the cool little random things you could do on top of it, where we could throw in a random effector. So here's a random effector that should be affecting the matrix object, and I don't want to move on Y for now, but let's say that this is actually based on a noise. It's indexed, so each of them is individual. We'll set the animation speed way down, and the strength probably needs to be pretty weak. Okay, so now what's happening is this matrix, all these little dots are slightly wiggling around. So now we've got this tracing around. We've got this tracing around, but now the brush strokes aren't perfect. They're constantly changing just a little bit. So, you know, that's kind of cool. And then if you want to add additional, potentially, if you want to add additional imperfections, I'll add another random effector to it. And this one would be .y. And I want to move this one only up and down. So let's say 0, 0. And the reason I made it a separate one is I'm going to say that this effector is not going from negative 100 to 100. I'll say it's just going from 0 to 100. So now it's only going to move in the positive direction. But if I say that this should go to -5, then now they should be able to randomly dip down. And I don't know how far down I should go, but the idea is at their max, they're going to poke up above the ground. But now some of the lines are drifting below the ground. So the entire line is still there, just oftentimes they're below ground. And they'll slowly drift up and down. So different lines will appear at different times. If I actually set this to noise, indexed, and change the animation speed. Ooh, it just started pouring raining. So those should be animating up and down. And yeah, now you can see that we only got one little line and sometimes they're sneaking up. So that's a slow animation speed. I don't want to push down so far, -15 or -5 instead. So now, -10. Yeah, I'd have to find the right amount. But anyway, now you see I'm kind of getting these random streaks depending on how I set it up. Yeah, so now look at these kind of more like some imperfections on there, so it's not as perfect and consistent. Now, I'm not saying that definitely that's the way to do it, but that's a way of starting to think about it. Then you feed that tracer into a volume builder, volume mesher, and if we make it detailed enough, and you know, we're in a live stream and we want to see it in relative real time, so crank up the detail and shrink the radius. But now if we, and you know, let's set that to 3. So now you can start seeing we get these individual streaks going. Typically, you always want your voxel size to be smaller than your radius. So you can see how those are separating out. Increasing the density doesn't really change it, so we'll leave that as low as it seems to work. And now we can see we get these individual brush streaks, and some are pushing further below the ground and some are above it. And if you wanted a, in this case, more consistent streak where they're all connecting, I would just make more of this matrix. So endpoint doesn't change, but now we'll make twice as many brush strokes. And now, as it draws, you can see that we're getting like really nice combination of kind of random streaks. And we can keep pushing that further. Let's double it again. So I'm gonna say 40. So this should start looking more consistent, where it's like, it's pretty much solid, in theory, solid paint, but you see how we're getting different random lines all following the correct direction. Let's change the resulting color just so it pops out a bit. Yeah, so already I think this is a kind of a more elegant technique than I had originally done. 1 second. There's a tiny little bug. Anyway, yeah, you can see how we're getting very nice paint streaks overall, and it makes a, you know, this is the quick version of it, but yeah, definitely feels a little bit like a brush stroke. Now, obvious things that are wrong with this setup, or not wrong, but this is one color. It's just passing over itself, and yeah, they will merge and blend in with each other, but you know, it didn't redirect those other lines where really it should completely override those. But there, I mean, and there are additional things you could do. Like you could make these start blurring and blobbing in via various methods. For instance, if I do a smoothing here, yeah, so you can see I put this smoothing on where everything started looking very flat. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. But so the basic idea, I'm trying to think of how I'd want to set it up, but my thought was, how do I do it? Okay, maybe this would work. I will make another tracer, and this tracer is still tracing the original null, and I'm going to limit it from end, and let's say for 30 frames. I'm not sure that's correct, so let's see if I actually get the line I'm expecting. Yeah, so you can see that's leaving a little trail behind, which is correct. I just want it to be longer. So now you can see we should get a 60 frame tail chasing behind. Okay, so that seems fine. And let's just rename that tracer dot smooth. So now we've got this smoothing. Let's get some of this traced out. Okay, so you can see that we've got this whole line doing its thing. There's going to be problems with this, but if I drag that tracer smooth in as our limiting factor, you can see that it's currently tracing along. So in theory, you see how it's smoother here and less smooth there. There's going to be errors on this, but I don't want to spend too long on it. So the basic idea being inverting the result. So I'll just say an invert. So now early on, we get all this really sharp detail, and as it continues forward, these start to kind of blob and smooth away. So we could get rid of some of that, and you see that, yeah, indeed, that's very smooth, and here that's a lot more harsh. So hitting play, we get these drawn out, sharper features. Yeah, see, that's the error I was expecting, where it erased, they came back in again. But if we just look in the starting part, you see how it's sharp and then blobs as it goes further. We probably want this tail to be longer, but you see how those did blob in. I can't, I knew that this was going to happen. There are potential, actually, yeah, there's definitely ways around that. Here's a random thing that pops in my head. It's going to be low detail. Oh, but anyway, if this was all working properly and it wasn't cutting through, right here it should be fine. Actually, no, it seems kind of backwardsy. But the hope was going to be that it would blur, that would have gotten smoothed out, and as it passed through, we get the sharper one, and then that would fade out again. Suddenly seems backwards. Why is it suddenly sharp? It's blurred here and sharp over there. Why would that invert? I mean, I know that's inverting it, but this is more what we... Actually, it's kind of wrong both ways. But once again, it goes to... We're getting a curve. We're getting a curve on there. Here, actually, I guess I can show you via the methodology I want to use. So I'm going to turn off that plane. It's not really doing anything. This one, what's the resolution on it? I'm going to keep it pretty low point count. Maybe not that low. This will be not very detailed, but it will work for demonstration purposes. Making that editable. Adding a vertex map. First of all, I just want to show you what the problem with... Let's turn on fields in our vertex map. The problem with the curve that we're getting is, do you see, this is what it actually looks like when you're falling off. So if I start over, you see how it's kind of this wall, but when it turns, eventually some of these arcs are going to pass over its former self. So you see it was all looking good here until this rotates around and suddenly that passed through. So that's visualizing what was going to happen. Okay. Instead of that, now that we've kind of got this plane that can remember things in a different way, we can say don't trace the smooth. Instead, let's just straight up look at this matrix as point object is fine, I think. Yeah, so we see that, and then I'll add on a decay of 95%. So it should be remembering that value. So the hope is, let's hide that. Okay, that's not, maybe this matrix isn't the best idea. Let's put that in as a MoGraph object. Does that see it? It's not, it's not refreshing. It's not seeing the updated version of that. Now, we're not stuck to that. If the matrix doesn't want to, if the matrix isn't going to cooperate there, then we can just do it with this tracer smooth. And I'll set that to be a radius instead. So there we go. So reset, hit play, and now wherever this tracer goes, you see we're going to be leaving this line behind, and even that line will disappear. In fact, right now the tracer smooth, I could say, actually, I don't care, only trace 5 frames. So now it's only going to exist there for 5 frames. And now the fading out tail is instead based on our vertex map. So if we set this up properly, and it will get real sensitive, but if we increase the radius a bit, potentially, and we want to crank up the resolution, but like I said, we're not going to worry about that. And even here, the remapping, I could make an inner radius so that that's like really strong. So now, as this goes through, we're going to end up with full power, and then it fades out slowly. That's not bad, and we slow way down there, so that might work. So now that we've got this vertex map that can get referenced, let's bring this geometry back again. Now the smoothing will not be referencing that smooth anymore. Instead, it's going to reference that vertex map. This will be looking at the nearest possible shape. It's probably going to be better calculation-wise to say average it, but that might be way slower to calculate. But let's see what happens. So right now, everything that is near yellow is very smooth and blurred. We want the opposite, so I'll throw an invert there, which should... I guess we're blurring 100. Is that too much? I think it was too much. Or it's not enough. Nearest. Invert. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'll just do nearest. So, yes, I want to invert because that looks very sharp. So now as I play, in theory, as this fades away, it should start looking smoother. That's the theory. Change the visible mode, and let's see if it actually is doing that. So, yeah, it seems fairly distinct here. That seems kind of smooth. It's kind of happening slowly over time, so effectively, the effect should be almost impossible to see. And you can actually see it really well here. Look over here. It definitely looks sharp over there. And then over here, it looks very smooth. And it's really imperceptible where the transition happens. That's because we're getting that nice slow fade. Now, the hope is you see that this is super blurred out. Actually, yeah, this won't fully work. But that's super smooth now. And as this passes over, it's going to become sharp again. But you see it's actually bringing in the previous sharpness as well. So, and I can think of ways of getting around that, but like I said, this ends up being a rig where you have to keep on adding more and more and more things on top of it to compensate for other things. But, you know, it's decent paint streaks traveling around. We could make some sort of blobby paint on the front by adding, you know, kind of anything we want. In the volume builder, we could put that matrix. I don't know how this will look, but let's just put in that matrix. And can we increase the... Oh, it looks like those aren't moving either. That's a little frustrating. Like, I want that blob to be where the matrix is, but it's not refreshing. I don't know why. I mean, you know, obviously other ways of doing it. I mean, here's going to be a terrible one, but we could, again, bring that volume smooth in there, which is a short one. Increase the density, increase the radius, and now you can see... You know, I can at least get a blob up there, and that's going to be just a blob that moves around with it. We could obviously do a million things to make that more detailed, but just to show you that, you know, it'd be easy to add in some sort of paint detail in the front that would be fading out into the rest of it. But yeah, that you can see as I stepped through thinking of different aspects of it, you can see how there are, you know, additional elements to think about. We could be having so many different things like fading out getting less detail, something fading in. One thought would be that all of these lines would slowly sink through the ground continuously, so they kind of would fade away, but there'd be a different solid shape that would pass through also, and that would remain. So like all these little line details would just fade out over time, and then if we did some sort of setup along those lines, passing back over itself here would have made new streaked lines heading that direction. None of this addresses at all the color issue of being able to get different colors as we go. You know, from a top-down perspective, obviously we could be projecting different colors onto here, which could be okay, but that wouldn't stop the that wouldn't give us a color smear as we traveled through. So that the only ways I can think of that you'd end up kind of rendering this out as an animation, and then like in After Effects or something, like getting the color to smear the other one, and then reprojecting it on there, which is not something we're going to do. Anyway, let's see. Nope. We had a spam message in there, but how do I get rid of it? Follow Blanc Whisper. Give a sub. Report. Oh, I don't want to have to do all this. Spam. Spam. No, I don't want to. It's making me do all this stuff. I guess that'd be better. I'm just gonna block them. Block. It's 107 in Texas. It was really hot here, but it was only like the 90s, mid 90s. Not definitely not over 100. Let's see. I'm looking for follow-up questions to this one. You can get a nice thick. You can get thick and thin areas by adding erode to the volume and controlling through fields. Yes, that would be another option. A lot of those take longer to calculate. That's why I went with the simple smooth. But the idea of feeding through like erodes and opening and closing, like you could actually smooth things out or inflate things a little bit with that, and you could feed fall-offs through them as long as you did the from the menu version. Can a volume mesher be a collider and have self-collisions? What does that even mean? A volume mesher be a collider and have self-collision? Like, I can't construe that question in any way that the answer would be yes. Like, yeah, that just doesn't work. Now, it does go to if you were doing something with particles, like that's where I could start imagining the ability to steal some color. Like if this was raining a whole bunch of particles down, and it's like the particles that you were spawning were changing color as we travel. It's like, okay, we're spitting out a bunch of blue and we transition into green and we transition into red. And then here we bump into those other particles and then they could potentially get moved along with us or even maybe stuck a little bit to the current ones. And then you take that as a material, blur it a little bit. Like I can imagine how that would work. But definitely don't have that here in... Definitely don't have that in vanilla cinema. And then unfortunately you can't, I don't think we can even transfer vertex color maps in any way from one object to another, which would be awesome if you could. But because everything would have to be made editable, we could not transfer even the vertex map color onto this parametric setup. I do think we might have proved at one point that you could bake it out as a lembic and then feed a vertex map onto it. You know, so there's potential there. That wouldn't really help with anything we want to do here. They would just transfer a color. A rogue, a way to displace itself as it crosses over. I mean, the volume wouldn't be doing anything along those lines. That's why we need to, because there's no data stored in the volume. It's just, the volume is just, what is the input? How am I modifying my direct input? There's no feedback loop when it comes to the volume itself. That's why we're using the tracers as information for doing like fall-offs, like by tracing along the tracer or having a radius. And then by making this vertex map on the plane, that's what actually gave me the ability to do feedback loops or fade things out in a dynamic way. There is persistent information that can loop around and do something else. And that's how we're getting like these nice fades going. Yeah, that's just a thought. Okay, so we got time for one more question, or if there's any more specific follow-ups here. I guess I should save it. It's amazing. Well, yeah, a giant wish I would have for Cinema 4D, and I know that Xparkle has one, but I really wish we could get a, I wish that selection tags and vertex maps and vertex color maps could work on parametric objects, because that would open up like a huge amount of opportunities. Because so often we're driving things through fields that this isn't even about. The reason I could see them not wanting to do it is if your selection, if your, let's say you have a polygon selection tag. If we had a parametric polygon selection tag on top of this volume mesh, the point count is constantly changing, and some are disappearing and some are reappearing, and that would be bad. Like it wouldn't be able to store that data. But if you turn on use fields and we were referencing, say, the vertex map on this plane object, it doesn't matter that it's changing every frame, because we're not getting the information based on what happened in the previous frame. We're getting the information based on what the vertex map currently says, and that would give us the coherence that we need in all sorts of ways. Terry, I don't doubt that you're saying that there's a Python script that allows you to do it. I try and make it so that the live streams are as vanilla as possible whenever I can get away with it. So I try not to like be like, oh, you need this plugin, you need this thing, you need to add this. So yeah. You know, maybe at one point we could start talking about that type of thing more, but it always gets to be tricky where it's like, oh, I know we used this tool, we used this thing in the past, but oop, now a new version and we don't have it, and you know, who knows, it's all over the place. Anyway, let me check YouTube. Morph two objects with very different point count. Alternatives to the morph tag. Essentially, Adrian, essentially there's not a way to do that. If you're going to morph something, you have to start from the same base mesh, like by definition. If that's not what you want to do, then you end up doing a completely different technique. And the obvious thing would be something like a volume. We couldn't kind of morph anything into anything if we blob them together in a volume. Let's try and do like a super simple, silly version. Objects. Where's the elephant? Reveal in browser. Okay, I want to, what do we morph into what? Let's morph an elephant and a raptor. We're gonna make a giant raptor, so they're approximately the same size. I wonder if we should move them up. So obviously when it comes to morphs, a lot of the cool details with a morph are about like the motion going into it, and I'm not even gonna do any motion. In fact, one of the recent Corridor Artist Reacts videos was really good, where they had one of the people who worked on Terminator 2 there, and it was all about like making sure that things didn't just crossfade into each other, but they'd move from one spot to another while crossfading. And essentially, that's what we're going to be doing here. So what I'm saying is, if we had time and the inclination, something that would be smart is if I had this whole raptor rigged up and the raptor's arms went into position of the tusks and the raptor's head bent down where the elephant's trunk is. And so as the raptor kind of rears up, it would look like that the trunk is morphing into the head. Right now I'm just going to crossfade blur them, which is like way more boring. But the other version is like the big long 5-hour version. And we're about to do the 20-minute version. Anyway, volume builder, volume mesher, and these are all going to end up in the same thing. So let's just drop, I'll throw that into a connect. Why not? Connect, keep it simple. That'll be the elephant. This will be the velociraptor. Drop. Okay, so now you can see that we've got these two different shapes blobbing into each other. We could increase the detail a little bit. And then let's make a external volume smooth, maybe. Well, we can probably make several, honestly. So let's make a vector smooth. And let's temporarily turn off the elephant. So we're just looking at, actually, let's make the elephant the bottom. Turn it on, vector smooth. Let's do an SDF smooth. I think that's the one we actually want. There we go. SDF smooth, and that will be on the elephant. And this can actually be changed to the different modes. So this is smoothing, which is fine. I shall make a folder, and then we can put things into the folder. So smoothing, how much do we want to smooth? I mean, smoothing is slow. Keep that in mind. We can do additional iterations. You can see it can get like really blurred out. And at the same time, let's make another, and this one, let's make it be a open or close. I think we'll do a dilate. So we want this to go negative, and we're going to have it start shrinking down. And honestly, it probably wants to shrink down to nothing. So the minimum nothing is right around there. So let's hide the velociraptor, and now we've got our two smooths. And I will create a group field, and inside of the group field, make a linear field. And the linear field will change to Z+. And now you'll see, and it's not going to be fast, but now you can see that as I pass this through, the effect is getting applied through the model. Now, it's not quite erasing it out entirely. Did this get applied to both? Yes, it did. Not sure why it's not fully erasing it out. Oh, let's move that down. Yeah, I'm not sure why it got weaker. It doesn't seem to want to erase out the entire thing at all. I mean, I wanted to just kind of blur it out. Let's do the erode before the smooth, so at least the smoothing comes after. And you can't go above 100. Anyway, you can now see that, you know, we end up with, there's very little, and then slowly the elephant will get revealed. I do want the entire thing to disappear. We could do some sort of just straight up Boolean. But I did want it, I mean, the simple way was just going to get them the blob. But yeah, it doesn't want to erode any further, no matter how big I'm making that number. Why would that be? And you can even see we're getting these weird chunky voxels. I'm not even sure what to make of that. Let's see, now I'm just clicking around, not even knowing what we're doing there. There are additional things we can do for sure. The simple one being, I could drag this linear field in and say that this should match the object below. And then I can say subtract. Even that's not erasing the whole thing out. Like, part of it's being left behind no matter what. I wonder if there's just an empty void in the volume. That's what I'm thinking now. But no, I don't think that makes any sense. What's going on? Turn those off. Turn that off. Is there an interior? No, see, the elephant's one volume. That's the way it was behaving, so that's what I thought it was. I thought that there might be like an inner group, but other aspects of it weren't following through on there. So yeah, I'm not sure why the elephant is giving us so much trouble. Even, what is it doing now? So everything's in this folder. Let's turn off that. But yeah, look how chunky that is. But now, look at the order. It's like, okay, here's the elephant. And then we're saying dilate a whole bunch. And then we're saying smooth it after the fact. But that's not smoothed. That's not smoothed at all. Oh, and deleting those, or just straight up deleting them. Wonderful. Yeah, if something's a child of it, when you delete, it deletes it entirely. But if we remote link in... Yeah, look, it's behaving even more strangely. If I drag the smooth in... If I drag the smooth in here... I'm sorry, that's not smooth. It's the dilate. But I'm dragging the dilate, and it's at the same negative 45 that had been mostly erasing it. And look what's happening now. Like, that's not erasing it. It's got the group field. Let's delete that out. Yeah, this group field is suspicious. Because without the group field, it does erase out the entire thing. I'm not sure how it's interacting with this. But it's definitely missing something. I feel like we might have bumped into almost these exact same troubles in a similar question a year ago. We're not even getting to the, like, what would have been the interesting part. Like, because it's just not working beforehand. And I just don't know why. Everything we're doing there feels like it should be working properly. I've never been super clear on, like, fog. Oh yeah, and these don't work with fog mode. I don't want it to just abandon. But I cannot think of anything to do to fix it. So yeah, I'm not usually inclined to abandon one, but it's just gonna be, it was gonna be a quick, like, tech demo, and the tech just isn't working, and I am honestly stumped as to why. I don't know why feeding a field through these SDF like modifiers is changing it, but it is. Maybe we can take a crack at that again sometime in the future, but I don't want to pursue that anymore right now. Not even going to save the file. Go away, file. Bihavana was asking, in regards to my plugin Slicer, is there a way to use color user data to drive slice level color assignment or something like that? Slice level color assignment with use color user data. Essentially, yes, kind of trivially. What's a good... Let's have the elephant redeem itself. Let's pull the elephant in, and I'll build a volume out of the elephant again. builder mesher. We'll make it decently detailed. Boop. And you know what? He should probably be smoothed out a bit. There we go. Nice. So, we've got a nice solid volume of elephant. So then we grab the plugin slicer. Slicer, this one. And we can feed the model in, and then you see it's getting sliced. And what we need to do if we want to assign color to it is really straightforward, and that's just create a matrix object. So I'm going to say, we can make this matrix however we like, but let's say that there are 20 vertical matrix objects all stacked up. So now if I go into the slicer, I can say the orientation shouldn't be based on like Y+, it should instead be based on the matrix. So I turn on this matrix and say link this matrix, and now you can see we have a cut everywhere that there is a matrix object. So I could move these up, we could make there be more of them. We could even move them around randomly with MoGraph. Not rotation, but you can definitely do position. So I can say randomly move, and you see that the slices are kind of randomly moved up and down. Those could even be animated. So I can say effector, noise, index, animation speed, hit play, and I can see all those slices like calculating very quickly and wiggling around up and down. The vertical thing is the only thing that matters, but yeah, you definitely get those slices. So anyway, that's a matrix. But if we say, okay, matrix, I want you to get another random effector, and this random effector is not going to affect position, but instead just be based on the field color. And the field, actually, not random. Matrix will be fed a plane effector. Doesn't affect position, but it does take on the color of the fields. Inside the fields, that gets a random field. And turn on color, doesn't matter about the position. And now you can see I've got all these different colored matrices. So now inside of the slicer, we've got all these wonderful cuts, but I can say, okay, slicer, you're actually going to explode, actually, under segments, I'm going to say explode every cut, essentially every layer, explode them out into their own separate object. So technically this is no longer a single spline getting returned, it's a null with as many splines underneath it as we have cuts. But I can say colorize those lines based on, we can say from randomly, we can say grayscale, but I'm going to say from matrix. And if we deselect, you can now see that every single cut is taking on the color of the matrix. And that is actually assigning, if I make this editable, you'll see that we've now got a bunch of different splines, and each spline has been assigned that matrix color. So third-party renderers should be able to be set to view color user data, and these will be correctly getting fed through and getting these colors. So yeah, the idea is use the matrix object, and this works with Ricochet as well. Use a matrix object and colorize the different particles of the matrix, and that should just work for you. Yep, the power of the matrix. Pretty fun. As a quick aside, because I don't talk about it too often, if you want to get random, it's a lot slower, but you could get a whole bunch of different random cuts and different orientations. I just mentioned, let's start over from scratch. So we've got the volume elephant, and you can make a whole bunch of cuts in one particular orientation, but we have to essentially do a bunch of math to analyze the geometry to know how we're going to cut it. So if you were to do different orientations, that means it has to calculate, it has to do a brand new calculation every time. But what you could do is do a single slice and remote link into the elephant. So we should be getting one cut right there, which is, that's exactly what we want. But if I say, okay, this is based on the position, that's fine. We're getting one cut from the elephant. But if I say, feed that slicer into a matrix object, or I'm sorry, put into a cloner, and now we're getting a bunch of copies of it. So I'll say linear with no offset. So now there's a whole bunch of, there's currently 3 slicers in the exact same spot. But I can say, okay, add random in, and add in a random rotation of, I don't know, 720. Boop, boop, boop. So now we've actually got 3 random cuts, because essentially what we have here isn't one slicer making 3 cuts. We have 3 different slicers, and it works inside of the cloner. So now I can make as many clones as I want. And now we're getting random cuts all throughout the elephant, each with their own orientation. Now it's going to be a lot slower because we've actually made 55 different slicers, each one having to analyze the entire model so it knows how to cut it. But yeah, you can definitely see where that could get useful. And even here we could say actually create 2 slices per, and you'll get like double the amount. A lot cheaper. And now there's 3 cuts per. And it's going to be hard to tell that like there are 3 slices being shared by any given slicer, so that can actually work to your advantage. But, you know, even that could be animated, but it's going to be a lot slower because you're making so many copies. But yeah, you can make more than 1 cut directly on the model. I think that ends up looking pretty cool. And even, you know, the basics of making a regular slicer and doing a series of cuts and then making a copy of it and then changing the orientation. So now we can also get the vertical ones. You know, a lot of power to be able to layer these up and get different effects very quickly. I should have probably been saving those files as I hit those different key moments, but I forgot. I'll save this one. Random angle slicer cuts. Let's see. Yeah, we've only got about 5 minutes. Somebody has a cool question, but other people are saying, seem to like it, but saying save it for next week. So presumably it's going to be a longer question. Let's see. Demi's got a slicer question. Follow up. Can you slice the slicer? I mean, does a slicer cut only geometry, or does it also cut splines? It only cuts geometry, but slicer doesn't only have to return a spline. So inside of this single slicer, you can see I can make a bunch of different cuts of the elephant. We can make this taller, so we're actually getting, you know, the entire elephant captured. We can make a bunch of different cuts. So okay, now we got a nice kind of horizontal series of slices along the elephant. If we go to the geometry tab, we could say, right now we're returning geometry none, but I could say, you know what? I want you to return flat geometry. And now you can see that it's actually essentially, well, it's created geometry on every cut, which is, you know, a really powerful aspect to slicers. So yeah, we get all these different cuts. Now we've got geometry again. So, and you see even the icon changed. So anyway, now I could create a second slicer, and I'll say, don't return geometry again. And I'll rotate this one to -90, and let's make it longer again. And this time, this slicer will not be cutting the original elephant. Now it will be cutting the other slicer. So now the end result is actually, it can be useful, it can be cool. But what's happening is now you see what we end up with is a series of horizontal cross cuts. So I'm going to hide this geometry, and now you'll see that we actually get a series of straight lines traveling through the elephant, which is kind of crazy actually. The spline, yeah, currently let's open that, because right now those are technically open splines. So you can do kind of weird fun things like feed the, you know, let's put the second slicer into a sweep, feed the sweep an end side, scale that down, and look at that. We can end up with like some crazy shapes to make up the overall elephant. So yeah, we can make these circles, make them small enough. Depending on the way I distribute these cuts, this probably needs more slices. Yeah, to fill that out a little bit. But yeah, you can end up with some really wacky shapes that I'm not sure how I would do otherwise. So yeah, slicing a slicer is definitely a thing that I had explored a bunch. And yeah, these could get randomized. They could be getting randomly colorized. Trying to think of a specific effect to show off with that. But it's almost like a pile of lumber Elephant. And because they are splines, you can kind of feed anything you want through them. If we make fewer slices, gotta be careful with this. But if we make text, and I'm gonna really make it low poly, and let's just say RKT and T for scale. Probably still a little bit too large, but I'll drop that in instead. And now you see that we're getting the text repeated, depending on the orientation. We could change the orientation, but here you can see, it's going to be extruding text along there instead, or I guess technically sweeping text, even though it looks like, it looks like an extrusion, but it's actually sweeping. But look how abstract it gets. Like, it's kind of cool looking. Like, it's like, oh, look at this wacky pattern. But then you rotate, and it's like, oh, it's actually made of text. And it's text from a slice of a slice. So yeah, it can get weird. And fun. Let's see. Oh, there's a follow-up from Bihavana. You want to control the exact color, not just a random assortment. For example, you'd like to create a ramp, drive that color with a color data node, and drive each specific layer slice with a color of your ramp. Well, I mean, you could do that with a matrix object. Delete, bring that back based on a matrix, and don't be geometry. We actually just create a matrix. There's a button for that. So anyway, yeah, it creates a matrix object, and we move this down. But keep in mind the power of the matrix object, where right now, if we say the spline should be exploded layer with the color from the matrix, each of these is turning blue, but inside of the matrix, we can say fade a, what do we need? We need a plane, which is going to move them. But instead of moving them, we will colorize them. And in there, we'll add in a linear field, which will be up on Y. And now you can instantly see I get a gradient that I can control. If we stretch this all the way, we'll say field, linear, yes. Color remap, make that a gradient. And now you can see that anything I feed in this gradient is going to be controlled by it. So what's something that's not too colorful? Let's grab like this color heat map, and now you can see that that is what is being driven. So yeah, now we have direct control of that in a linear way. It doesn't have to be random. Random's just like the quick one to reach for. I don't know if that addresses your specific, or yeah, that's the way I interpreted your question, but you might mean something else. Oh yeah, Zach was just answering the same way, answering the exact same way I just did. And then yeah, of course that could be a black to white color map. And then if it was black to white, then you could colorize that in your node editor. How do you do this with Voronoi fracture? It's unbelievable. Pure, I am assuming you put a link in YouTube, but you can't put links in YouTube. You have to be on Twitch to put a link. So you could head over to Rocket Lasso, search for Rocket Lasso on Twitch, and you could find it. But I think we're pretty much out of time. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there. I know that there's a couple of questions that people seem to like the look of. Hold on to those questions for next week, and we will definitely, I'll keep an eye out for them as well if they pop up in the chat, and we'll try and tackle them. It's just when you type out the question, be like, this is from last week, and we'll try and do it. Anyway, I think that will wrap up another episode. I've got some more recording to do. I did successfully record the first 4 instructional videos for the utility splines. So I have like 4 more to go, including the big 5 more to go. 4 more instructional videos and the quick start. The quick start takes a long time. But anyway, I'm forcing myself to get those recorded, which I really want to get done and get that thing out the door. Tobias is correct. Head on over to the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. You can join for free automatically by heading on over to the community page on rocketlasso.com. I just put the link in. Thank you so much, everybody, for the questions. We're going to be launching the half-res tickets soon. Half-res actually isn't that far away, so you have to pick up your tickets quickly if you want to come out and visit Chicago and check out our little one-night awesome party mini conference. But in any case, yeah, keep an eye out for that. I think I'm going to be clipping out a section of last week's episode. There's like a really good segment with like the water ripples. I might just clip that out as a standalone tutorial. And as I mentioned, I will be speaking for Maxon at SIGGRAPH in Vancouver in 2 weeks. I don't know the schedule yet, but I will be doing that. And the topic is going to be tips and tricks, but just about the Voronoi fracture. So that should be good. I'm still in the process of putting that presentation together, but I've got a whole bunch of notes and scene files and things referenced from different points in the live streams as well, like kind of bringing those to a new level and making them tiny and bite-sized. But anyway, that's a plan. Keeping super duper busy. So that will wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out and supporting. Be sure to follow and support on Patreon if you want to get access to the videos early and get access to occasional bonus streams, and especially for the scene files associated here. You'll be, every time I save something, you get access to that scene file and a bunch of discounts and all that good stuff. But anyway, that's going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.